You know, whenever we start looking at how organizations evolve, I always come back to two wildly different quotes from the research.
Oh, right. The ones that perfectly capture the whole tension of it.
Exactly. So, on one hand, you have Charles Darwin, right, who famously pointed out that survival doesn't go to the strongest or, the most intelligent. It goes to the one most responsive to change.
Which is very grand, very biological and sweeping.
Right. But then, in the very same stack of research we're looking at today, you have this incredibly blunt reality check from a consultant, Price Pritchett. And he basically said, the only person who likes change is a wet baby.
I love that quote. It is just so accurate. And honestly, that tension is exactly why organizational transformation is so fascinating to dig into. Because intellectually, we all want to be Darwin's adaptable survivors. We get the necessity of it.
Sure, we all want to be the winner.
Right. But in practice, on a random Tuesday when your company suddenly announces a massive restructuring and a brand new reporting hierarchy, we all tend to feel a lot more like the wet baby. I mean, the transition is uncomfortable, it's totally disruptive, and human nature just inherently rebels against it.
And yet, if your company can't change, it eventually dies, which is a problem. So today, we're looking at the research that kind of bridges that gap.
Yeah, the mechanics of how it actually works.
Exactly. We are unpacking a massive stack of academic research and consulting notes centered around this concept called organizational capacity for change, or OCC for short.
OCC, right.
And I want to speak directly to you listening right now. Whether you are the CEO leading this massive corporate pivot or, you're a frontline employee just trying to survive yet another new software rollout at your desk, this deep dive is going to reveal exactly why these change initiatives usually crash and burn.
And they really do crash and burn a lot.
Oh, constantly. So we're going to look at how you actually build the structural muscle for transformation, and we'll dig into the surprising ethical frameworks that determine whether a change actually sticks over time.
Yeah, and my focus today is really going to be on the underlying architecture of all this. I want to synthesize these frameworks, not just to, list off what goes wrong, but to dig deeply into the systemic mechanisms.
The structural why.
Exactly, the structural why. Because once you understand the systemic reasons behind organizational failure, you can stop just reacting to the superficial symptoms. You can start actually curing the underlying disease.
All right, well, before we talk about building the muscle, I think we need to take a quick walk through the graveyard.
The graveyard of failed initiatives, I like that.
Yeah, because we have to look at all these disasters to understand the environment we are actually operating in. If you look at the sources, the standard reasons for failure are pretty much the greatest hits of corporate misery.
Oh, absolutely.
You've got a lack of leadership commitment, poor communication, insufficient resources.
And massive employee resistance, which, the text ties directly to fears about job security or just a general loss of power.
Right. People get scared. But those are just the surface level symptoms, right? That's just what everyone in the office feels day to day.
Yeah, exactly. If we look at the deeper analysis in the research, the root cause of that failure almost always stems from what the authors call a bias for action.
A bias for action. Break that down for us.
So when executives feel a lack of control, say the market is shifting, pulling a single lever or demanding immediate, visible action gives them this psychological illusion of safety. They mistakenly treat their company like a machine.
Right, like pulling a lever fix everything.
Yeah, they assume you can just swap out a gear and expect the machine to run faster.
Yeah.
But they completely forget that the gear is actually a human being who is, terrified of losing their livelihood. Humans require meaningful work. They aren't just mechanical operations waiting to be optimized by management.
Which brings us to probably the most crushing factor in all of this, which is the squeeze of time.
Oh, the time crunch is real.
It's insane. There are two specific accounts in the source material that illustrate exactly why leaders fall into that bias for action. So first, there's this president of a major nonprofit medical center.
Right, I remember this one.
Yeah, he noted that 10 years ago, his strategic planning horizon was 5 years into the future. That was standard. Then, 5 years ago, it shrank down to 2 years. And today, thanks to just relentless healthcare reform, his planning horizon is down to 2 months.
2 months to plan the strategy for a massive medical center. That's just wild. But the environmental volatility is accelerating across every sector, not just healthcare.
Right, because the second account is from a CEO of a Fortune 500 chemical company, and he openly lamented that there is this merciless pressure to deliver financial results to Wall Street every single quarter.
Every 90 days.
Yeah, he said his stock price gets actively punished if he dares to look beyond the next 3 months.
Which forces you into that bias for action.
But wait, let me push back here for a second. Because the research describes modern organizational change as, and I love this phrase, rewiring a plane while it's flying.
It is a terrifying but brilliant analogy.
Shit, it really is. But if Wall Street or your board or your investors demands a newly rewired plane in exactly 3 months, isn't that bias for action entirely justified? I mean, if you don't show action in 90 days, your stock plummets and you crash anyway.
Well, it is a highly rationalized reaction, I'll give you that, but it is ultimately a fatal one for the organization.
Fatal? How so?
So the research outlines that when faced with these extreme environmental pressures, organizations typically default to one of two mechanisms. The first is just denial. Leadership simply ignores the pressure, clings to the status quo, and pretends the plane isn't making a strange rattling noise.
Which obviously ends in disaster.
Right. And the second reaction is what you're describing, which they call reactive adaptation. This is your classic piecemeal, quick-fix approach. It's rushing to put duct tape on the wings because you have a 3-month deadline, and you need to show the board that you did something.
So it looks like action. It temporarily satisfies the board.
Exactly. But it doesn't address the root causes of the turbulence at all. Every piece of duct tape you apply actively degrades the aerodynamic integrity of the airframe over time. You are making the plane heavier and less efficient.
Just to hit a quarterly goal.
Yes. To actually survive that 3-month pressure cooker without eventually crashing the plane, the organization has to employ the third option, which is proactive transformation.
Proactive transformation. Okay, so what does that actually look like?
It means actively scanning the environment, anticipating the challenges before the alarm bells ring, and implementing comprehensive systemic changes rather than just reactive ones. You fix the engine before you take off, essentially.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because since we know those reactive duct tape fixes fail, we have to talk about the solution, which is building that proactive capacity for change before the crisis hits.
Right, before you're in the air.
Exactly. The research calls this organizational capacity for change, or OCC. And it defines it as a dynamic, multidimensional capability combining human skill sets, formal systems, and culture.
And the most vital takeaway from the data here is that the more volatile your environment becomes, the more this specific capacity leads to superior financial performance. It's not just HR talk.
It shifts from being a nice-to-have HR concept to your ultimate competitive advantage.
Precisely.
So the sources outline 8 distinct dimensions of OCC. And instead of just listing them off like a textbook, let's look at how they actually function in reality.
Let's do it.
Starting with the human element. The first two are trustworthy leaders paired with trusting followers. Now, you obviously need leaders with integrity, that's a given, but I always assumed employee pushback was just a sign of bad management.
A lot of people think that.
Right. But the research points out that a lot of resistance is actually baggage the employee brings with them to the job. Every individual has what they call a disposition to trust, and it's shaped by past work trauma, family norms, and even genetics.
Genetics. That detail blew my mind. But that psychological reality fundamentally changes how you have to manage a transition.
How so?
Well, think about it. If you are leading a workforce made up of naturally optimistic individuals, they will experiment with new ways of operating simply because you ask them to. They trust the process.
Right, they have a high baseline of trust.
Exactly. But if your culture is filled with cynical people, maybe they've survived multiple failed corporate restructurings in the past, they will inherently resist the change no matter how brilliant your new strategy is, because their baseline disposition is self-protection.
Which brings us right to the bottleneck of almost every company I've ever seen. The next 2 dimensions of OCC are capable champions and involved middle management.
The infamous middle management layer.
Yes. The text says that champions are usually drawn from the ranks of middle management. And I was thinking about this. We often treat middle managers like the plumbing of a company, right?
Like they're just pipes.
Exactly. Like they are just there to passively pass information down from the executives to the front line. But this research suggests they are actually the valve. They can actively or passively block the entire initiative.
That is the perfect mechanism to understand their role. They are the valve. Middle managers exist at the exact intersection of strategy and execution.
They're the translation layer.
Yes. Because of that unique position, they are the only ones who can translate a sterile corporate mandate into something that generates a critical mass of excitement among the frontline workers.
Right, because an email from the CEO doesn't get anyone excited.
Exactly. But if the valve is shut, like if the middle managers aren't involved in the planning or don't personally believe in the change, they will passively nod in the executive meetings. And they'll go back to their teams and just say, well, just do it. Corporate wants it done.
And the initiative just dies right there in the
It
pipes.
dies completely. You have zero momentum.
Because, you can have the most motivated humans in the world, you can have a wide open valve, and they will still fail if the company's structural rules punish them for trying new things.
Which brings us to the systems.
Right, the structural dimensions of OCC, systems thinking, and communication systems. The text emphasizes moving away from a segmentalist approach.
Yeah, a segmentalist approach is basically when a company operates in isolated silos.
Like departments that never talk to each other.
Exactly. So, for example, if marketing launches a massive promotional campaign, but they don't tell manufacturing they need to quadruple production to meet the demand, the entire system breaks.
Because they're completely walled off.
Right. So systems thinking means your budgetary procedures, your performance metrics, and your communication channels actually force an organization-wide approach. Two-way communication is mandated.
Meaning the front line can actually tell the executives when a policy is failing without fear of retaliation.
Yes, the feedback loop has to be secure and structural, not just an open-door policy that no one actually uses.
Okay, and rounding out the structural side, we have the final two dimensions, and these feel a lot like a tug of war to me. It's an accountable culture and an innovative culture. How does an organization actually balance those two? It seems impossible.
It requires immense discipline, honestly, because an innovative culture motivates people to find creative solutions when things are ambiguous. It encourages risk-taking.
Which you need for change.
Right. But, as the research warns, if a culture focuses entirely on innovation, you just get chaos. Accountability for delivering results on time and on budget gets completely ignored.
Everyone's just brainstorming and nothing gets built.
Exactly. On the flip side, an entirely accountable culture tracks every single deadline and respects every budget, but it completely suffocates creativity. People are too scared to try anything new because they might miss a metric.
So you need the tension.
You absolutely need the tension of both. You need the freedom to invent a new process, coupled with the strict evaluation of who actually facilitated its success and who hindered it. That's true capacity for change.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, though, because having the structural capacity to change these 8 dimensions is essentially like building a highly efficient, high-speed train.
Okay, I'm with you.
But having a fast train doesn't mean you actually know where you're going. You still need tracks to guide it. Without those tracks, your high-speed organization is just going to efficiently drive itself right off a cliff.
It'll just fail faster.
Exactly. So how do leaders ensure the change they are driving isn't destructive?
Well, the tracks in your analogy represent the ethical compass of the organization.
Yes. And the source material brings in 3 distinct ethical lenses to view change through. I find this part fascinating. First, there's utilitarianism, which is basically the math of morality, right? The greatest good for the greatest number, maximizing financial benefits and minimizing harm.
Right, the classic business school approach.
Yeah. Then you have deontology, which is about duty and principle. So in a workplace reality, deontology means acting in a way that your actions could become a universal law.
Give me an example of that.
So, for example, you don't fire 10% of your staff right before Christmas just to make this quarter's numbers look good. Because if every company used humans as disposable quarterly buffers, if that became a universal law, the entire labor market and economy would just collapse.
That makes a lot of sense.
And lastly, virtue ethics. This focuses on the character and the integrity of the actor themselves. It's about things like courage, fairness, and compassion.
And when you filter corporate change through those 3 ethical lenses, you arrive at what they call the core values of organizational development, or OD.
OD values, right?
Yes, and these OD values mandate participation, fulfilling human potential, authentic dialogue, and really recognizing the organization as a complex, interconnected community of people, not just a spreadsheet.
And the sources give us this incredible real-world artifact to show what this actually looks like in practice, the Johnson & Johnson Credo. Oh, that document is amazing.
It really is. It's essentially virtue ethics put down on paper, and it establishes this strict, almost anti-Wall Street hierarchy of responsibilities.
Walk us through the levels.
Okay, so level 1, Their very first responsibility is to the doctors, nurses, patients, mothers, and fathers who use their products. That's number one.
Not the shareholders.
Not the shareholders.
Yeah.
Level two is their responsibility to their employees, respecting their dignity, ensuring job security, helping them fulfill family responsibilities. Level three is their responsibility to the communities they live in and the environment.
And then finally,
Coming in dead last at level four is their responsibility to the stockholders.
it is a profound statement of priorities. It fundamentally rejects the standard Wall Street model that we talked about earlier, which makes me want to ask you a very pointed question. Because connecting this back to that chemical CEO we talked about, the one who gets punished by investors for looking past a 90-day window. How on earth does an organization maintain the virtue ethics of the J&J Credo, putting employees and patients first, when the financial environment explicitly demands utilitarian, profit-first, quarterly results?
It is the central paradox for modern leadership, honestly. It's incredibly difficult. But the underlying mechanism here is that these OD values are not just moral window dressing. They are structurally required for sustainable change.
Structurally required.
Yes. Think back to the 8 dimensions we just covered. If you compromise your ethics for a 3-month financial win, let's say, you utilize that utilitarian math to lay off 10% of your workforce just to boost the quarterly stock price, you might satisfy Wall Street today.
Right, the stock goes up for a minute.
Exactly. But you have just poisoned the well.
You've destroyed the trusting followers dimension.
You've completely destroyed it. The remaining 90% of your employees are now deeply cynical. Their disposition to trust has been actively degraded by your actions. They know they are disposable.
So they go into self-protection mode.
Exactly. So when the environment shifts again in 6 months, and you urgently need the organization to adapt to a new threat, you have absolutely zero capacity for change. Your middle manager valves will shut tight. Your employees will quietly resist, and the initiative fails.
So it's about the long game.
Right. By adhering to virtue ethics, by putting employees and patients first, you are actually protecting the structural integrity of the organization. You're ensuring it can actually survive the next inevitable crisis.
Okay, but the J&J Credo sounds great on a theoretical level. Has a modern struggling company actually used these ethics and these dimensions to pull out of a tailspin?
They have, yeah.
Because the sources provide 3 real-world case studies, and I want to look at the exact mechanisms of how they did it. First up, the retail sector. We've got a major chain with declining sales, an outdated model, and super rigid structures. Frontline employees are actively resisting change.
Okay, so instead of just launching a new marketing campaign, which would be the duct tape fix, the leadership assessed their true capacity. They moved away from a segmentalist structure and deliberately fostered an adaptive culture.
But how did they actually do that?
The mechanism of action was empowerment. They didn't just tell retail workers to, feel empowered. They changed the system's thinking. They gave floor workers the actual discretionary authority to solve customer complaints on the spot without having to call over a manager.
Oh, wow. So suddenly the middle manager valve is open, the front line is engaged, and the text says the result was significantly higher sales and customer satisfaction. Next case, healthcare. We have a hospital with terrible employee morale, high turnover, and suboptimal patient outcomes. They realized their communication was totally inadequate and departments were entirely siloed off from each other.
Right. So they practiced what really looks like virtue ethics in action here. They focused heavily on cross-functional collaboration.
What was the mechanism for that?
It was instituting continuous evaluation and clear communication across departments that historically never spoke to each other. By bringing nurses, doctors, and administrators into the exact same authentic dialogue, they treated the hospital as an interconnected community.
Rather than a mechanical assembly line for patients.
Yes. And the result was a massive, measurable improvement in both patient satisfaction and employee engagement.
That's incredible. And finally, the tech sector. A software company that realized its rigid hierarchy was basically killing its competitiveness. So they broke down the top-down hierarchy to gain agility, replacing it with agile pods.
Right. Getting rid of those silos.
Yeah. They integrated a new tech platform, but more importantly, they developed new leadership training based on empowerment and trust. And it resulted in incredibly responsive innovation.
And the overarching pattern across all 3 of those industries, retail, healthcare, and technology, is vital to understand. In all 3 cases, the organizations didn't try to solve their crisis by pushing a new product to market.
They didn't use reactive adaptation.
Exactly. They didn't use the duct tape. They altered their fundamental culture by structurally embedding collaboration, empowerment, and continuous learning, they unlock their inherent capacity to change.
So what does this all actually mean for you, the listener? I want to give you a concrete way to use this on Monday morning. Whether you are a CEO drafting a 5-year vision, a middle manager acting as that crucial valve for your team, or a frontline employee just trying to navigate the chaos, you can use these 8 dimensions as a diagnostic audit tool.
It's a great way to look at it.
When you sit at your desk on Monday, look around and ask yourself, do we have trusting followers, or is the team bringing in trauma from the last bad rollout? Is our middle management valve wide open and championing this, or are they quietly suffocating it?
Oh, they're just nodding in the meetings.
Right. And does our system reward innovation while maintaining strict accountability, or are we just like throwing ideas at the wall?
Identifying exactly which dimension your company is failing at is the very first step to actually surviving the transition.
It provides immense clarity. You stop feeling overwhelmed by all the chaos, and you start seeing the structural levers that actually control the outcome.
To wrap this up, successful change is clearly not just about speed. It is a proactive, multidimensional muscle. You have to build it on a foundation of trust, accountable systems, and an unwavering ethical compass that remembers, at the end of the day, organizations are made of human beings, not mechanical gears. That human element is everything. And actually, before we go, I really want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over, something that builds on the mechanisms we discussed today.
Oh, I like where this is going.
So, we explored how an employee's disposition to trust, which we know is absolutely vital for an organization to adapt, is heavily influenced by their deeply ingrained past experiences, their family norms, and even their genetics.
Which honestly completely reframes how we look at employee resistance.
It really does. So this raises a fascinating question for you to explore on your own. If an organization's capacity for change relies so heavily on the pre-existing, deeply personal psychology of its workforce, can a company ever truly train its way to adaptability?
Oh, wow.
Or is the ultimate success of a massive corporate transformation actually decided the very moment they hire you?
That completely changes the stakes of a job interview, doesn't it? Well, hopefully, after today's deep dive, whether you're navigating a massive corporate pivot or just trying to adapt to the day-to-day chaos, you feel a little more equipped to be Darwin's responsive survivor and a little less like Price Pritchett's wet baby. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us, and we'll see you next time.